Well, hi everybody, and welcome to the live stream. Helps if I get that little branding bit off there. Whoops, still there. There we go. Hi everybody, and welcome to a live stream. Sorry about the slight little flops there, a little bit of button pushing. So welcome everybody. Here I am in miserable and rainy London. Seen a whole bunch of you have already joined, including from California and so on. So that's really great that you've all joined. In the show today, as usual, please leave loads of comments, loads of questions, and I'll come and answer as many of those as I possibly can, and during the course of the next 60 minutes or so. And I'll also touch on, if I get a chance, some of the other questions left over from last week and some that I've had during the week, because I do get lots of different questions during the week. One of the things I'm going to try and do, actually, is I'm going to use, because I think it worked relatively well last time, was using my iPad so I can keep up to date what's going, but I also keep an eye on there as well. So as everybody joins, because I find it just take a while for everyone to kind of join the live stream and kind of get into the flow of things, what I thought I'd do is touch on a couple of the questions that I have had quite a few of, and quite a few different people asking. Some of them touched on what we covered and touched on last week in the live stream. So a couple of things here. One of them, in my trusty old book, one of them that I have been asked a lot about is Alaska. And what is the situation with the Alaska season? Well, at the moment, of course, it is still pretty unclear, pretty uncertain. And in some ways, a lot of people got more pessimistic by some of the developments this week. So let's just run through what has to happen before the Alaska season can open. Now, normally the Alaska season opens around about sort of May-ish time, runs through to about October, although this year, some of the lines, including I think Norwegian, have actually scheduled cruises going much further in, right through to about November time. A couple of things that absolutely have to happen. Well, first of all, the CDC has to give the okay for the cruise lines to sail out of US ports. At this point in time, we don't really know what's happening with that. There is some signs that that is not going particularly smoothly because of all sorts of things going on. Obviously, the state of the pandemic, I guess, new administration, changing priorities, whatever. But the one thing we do know is that Carnival have told us that there's not very much progress on that to date. They're still waiting for the technical specifications. But we are seeing a lot of ships still coming back to the US, and I covered that in my most recent video. But one of the biggest signals, I think, that things could be moving slowly is, and again, I covered it in the update this week, is Norwegian Cruise Line have told around 1,000 crew members that they brought back to start the whole process of opening up cruising. They have told them they're sending them back home. And they're collecting all of those that are on ships around the Caribbean Sea, putting them on Norwegian Joy, send them back to Asia. The ones that are around, I guess, Europe, some of them also, which will be picked up in the Caribbean, will be put onto Norwegian Encore, which is currently in the UK, and being sent back home. So it certainly does look that that is going relatively not that great. So we don't really know the timing on that. So that's obviously the first thing that has to happen. And those test cruises will be the big, alerting to us, letting us know when things are likely to be happening. So that's the first thing. The second thing that has to happen, of course, is that Canada has to open their ports. Now, as you've probably seen in the news, Canada are taking a slightly stronger stance there, sort of locking their borders down, I guess, which so many countries are doing. Here in the UK, they've now moved to the Australian system, the New Zealand system of hotel quarantining for many, many countries and a growing number of countries. Canada, of course, are introducing that now, and they're kind of being pretty strict. The Canadians are due to review whether they're opening their ports to cruise ships, if I remember correctly, middle of March. Really important, Canada, because obviously a lot of the Alaska cruises leave from Canada, but also importantly, under US law, ships have to call on a foreign port, and there's Canadian port. So that's the second key thing. The third key thing, I guess, that has to happen is what is the regulations and rules around testing when you head back. As you know, in the US, you currently have testing when you head back. The positive news on that, though, and why that may be less of a restriction, is the CDC rules actually require everybody who returns to the US to have a test on the ship before they disembark. So that one is probably ticked. The fourth thing, of course, is what is the situation with excursions, and what are we going to be people going to be allowed to do on land? Is it still going to be those kind of enclosed and controlled cruise line only excursions? So the basic, it's a long way of answering the question, but those are the four things to really watch out for. But Alaska, certainly at the moment, it's looking uncertain and unclear. Linked to that which I thought was interesting, is Port Canaveral have just updated all their budgeting, and you may have seen me touch on this elsewhere. And what Port Canaveral is saying, although this doesn't affect Alaska, obviously, but what Port Canaveral is saying is they are now budgeting for only 3 ships to be sailing in July, with a slow staggering upwards. So that, that seems to be sort of timing that's heading, so that July period as well. So there's all this kind of stuff going on, and it's still pretty uncertain what is and isn't going to happen overall. So let's just take a look and see if how we're doing on the other questions there. My flow of questions is not coming up quite. I wanted on iPad, so I'm going to rely much more on here than I had planned to, which means you get the big old shadowy effects there. So let's have a look in terms of the questions. Loads of people joining, which is fantastic to see. It's also rainy around the world. People are talking about here, I see Dave is talking about considering January 2022 Carnival Legend, Baltimore, 14 days partial Panama. 2022, and I think I've covered that in a couple of other discussions. I think we had it last time, also on various posts. As you start to look and plan cruises, of course, the further out you look, the greater the amount of certainty. So certainly 2022 is starting to feel more likely because we'd have been through the whole vaccine process. The 7-day ban that the CDC has on cruises longer than 7 nights should be expiring in November. So certainly those longer cruises. And as you mentioned, Panama, even if you're sailing out of Florida, is normally a 10-day cruise, even if it's a partial transit. So certainly that is something to definitely look at, because a lot of those restrictions should be lifted. Of course, we also don't know, what the situation will be with the protocols in terms of mask wearing, distancing. That, of course, is going to reflect what happens on land. But we need to bear in mind, I guess we all thought that 2021 by now is going to be sorted. But that's the one thing I'm sort of factoring in as I look at these things even for 2022 is, am I still comfortable to book, knowing that there still may be some of the regulations and things in place? I think it feels that it's likely to have really have lifted a lot by then. Jess B saying, my May 2021 celebrity cruise was cancelled for Rome, pushed to October, then got cancelled again. We'll try again for 2022. And I'm guessing you might have actually been on the Edge, because the Edge, they originally had that summer season for the Mediterranean. They, of course, cancelled that, and they have pulled out of that ship, which is interesting to see, because Edge, they just announced this week, is now going to sell the Caribbean. But interestingly, they've only scheduled from June. So this, again, this whole thing with timing is interesting, that they've only scheduled cruises on Edge when it starts from June. So 2022, definitely have a try again. I think one of the things that's going to be very interesting to see is how quickly Europe opens. As you know, Europe, like I guess the US, has having quite a tough time with the second, third waves, etc. Italy is though open for cruises for Italian guests, and because of the way the EU works, for some of the EU guests as well can join those cruises. So certainly again, it's definitely worth trying, and keep trying. And again, 2022 to me feels like the time to commit. One of the things that I'm doing, certainly, as my cruises get cancelled, and I did have a cruise pretty much every month this year, and of course I've already lost up to May now, but as my cruises get cancelled, what I'm doing is, if I haven't paid the final balance, I'm taking that cruise, taking the small 20% or whatever, it isn't very much, and moving it to 2022. What I'm not doing so much of is, as final balances come due, because of the uncertainty, I'm kind of not doing that, because I want to keep some flexibility of cash, that if cruises get switched on, or when cruises get switched on, I can jump on those cruises, because I think we're going to see new cruises, very local cruises. So probably, out of the UK, for me, I guess if you're in the US, maybe, going out and calling on private islands and the Bahamas and that kind of stuff. So keeping that flexibility, I guess, is really, 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 really important. Jess basically saying this, what I was saying is, same itinerary, even if cruises ready this year, I think it's best to wait. I think one of the things, the point that Jess is making, which I think is an interesting point, is, if you certainly are nervous about any of the restrictions and requirements, or you feel it's not going to be the right thing that's going to really suit you with, the testing process, the mask wearing, the distancing, they're having to book into even the swimming pool, which is currently the case, having to book into theaters. not being able to dine with other people, those kind of things. If you are even the slightest bit concerned about those, looking for 2022 is definitely, feels to me like the thing to absolutely do. Anthony is asking, transatlantic August the 21st, what is the thinking? Now I'm guessing, sorry, I might just have a slug of water. Someone did suggest to me actually on the last one, when my throat also started crying out, that I should have something stronger than that. But actually, I don't actually drink anything other than water and non-alcoholic beer. So it's water. Then I got distracted. Anthony's asking, transatlantic August the 21st. Now, Anthony, I'm not sure if you're doing that on the Queen Mauritius. I'm guessing at that time it probably is Cunard, because most of the other sort of repositioned transatlantics would happen later than that. I actually am booked on a transatlantic from Southampton to New York in August, and I think it probably is, if I remember correctly, it's the beginning of August, because I sort of cross or come back, and I guess you're going on the one that comes back. That maybe makes sense, because there's seven nights. My thinking on this is it's kind of uncertain, but I would have thought if there's any chance of doing it, Cunard's going to want to run that transatlantic. The challenge they have is, based on my understanding and certainly reading of the CDC framework for conditional sailing, they do say in there that every ship that calls on a US port, whether it's to embark passengers or not, has to have gone through their process. So they have to have gone through all those stages, which is including getting the sign-off on that they're treating crew, and they have the right COVID protocols for crew, having all the testing capability validated, and then run test cruises. Now, what's not clear is how it's going to happen, but certainly in the framework for conditional sailing, that is a requirement currently. So it'll be interesting to see, and I'm sure behind the scenes, there's lots of negotiations on that whole topic going on, because if they have to do, they're going to have someone get to the US, go through the whole process, and so on. So certainly I have the August transatlantic. I'm feeling relatively optimistic, because it's a relatively straightforward process. Again, it does depend on whether the US is opened. As you know, the US currently bans anyone from the UK, the EU entering the country at all. So a lot of that depends on whether that's open, and then of course it depends on the whole testing protocol. So I would say, if I was betting it the way I'm seeing the August, I'm saying it's like 60-40. So better than not, not terribly bad odds at all. Emily's asking, am I crazy to book a cruise out of Barcelona for July? I would hold back, is what I would say at this stage, for a couple of reasons. One of which, Spain is one of the countries that's taken one of the more conservative views to cruising, pretty much as the UK has, pretty much as the US has done as well. So pretty conservative approach to the whole cruising. They have a total ban on cruising, as does the UK, and no dates for it to be renewed. In Australia and Canada, they actually have dates to renew those things. Spain doesn't. I think it's really uncertain whether the ports will be open and they'll be welcoming of people moving around. Now, if you're within, I'm not sure you are, Emily, but if you're within the Schengen zone, you're going to be able to move around much more. But the current state is, as vaccines roll out, the EU is relatively slow versus, say, the UK in terms of rollout, which is why there's the big spats and arguments going on at the moment about that whole thing. But it is a much slower process, and so by July, I guess they will have got through a big chunk of the population, particularly the more vulnerable elements. But it's hard to know how enthusiastic they are going to be opening. Now, what the EU is looking at doing is trying to open quicker movement between the EU countries. So even though France, for example, just from tomorrow is locking down their borders much more, but they are again allowing people who are within the Schengen zone or members of the EU to move around much easier. So I think there's just so many questions at this point in time that I would hold back. The thing you could do, particularly if it's a very low deposit, you might want to book it, but July, I mean, depending on the cruise line, June, maybe May, you're going to have to pay the final deposit. So you could, if you wanted to, on the assumption that you can find something where the deposit's either movable, you can lift and shift the deposit, and if you just want to have something to hold on to. But moving people in and out of the country, moving around ports, I think is still going to be difficult / questionable. And there may be more local cruises, but it's probably worth a bit of a gambit. Forever Get Raw is saying, hello Gary, which is better to visit Vietnam on an ocean cruise or one on the Mekong River? Now I've been lucky enough, fortunate enough to have done both of those. I was going to say, if you're visiting Vietnam and you want to really see Vietnam, I would strongly recommend doing a Mekong River cruise. The great thing about the ocean cruise is most of them will call in so you can go and see only very small parts of Vietnam, normally to Ho Chi Minh City. What's also very important if you go on a cruise to Ho Chi Minh City is if you're on a relatively big ship, so if you're in a mid-sized ship, a 2,000 and above ship, you do actually dock a really long way from Ho Chi Minh City. Like, it's really long way. It's a good hour or hour and a half from Ho Chi Minh City. If you're on a smaller ship like a Seabourn or a Silver Sea or something like that, you actually go right in and actually dock sort of in the Saigon area. I know there are some cruises that will get you to go further north to Hanoi. But if you really want to see Vietnam, I would strongly recommend a Mekong River cruise. I did that in January last year, just on that whole COVID thing. People were starting to talk about it and whatever. And it was interesting, actually, because at that time, you couldn't go into Vietnam and you couldn't go to some countries if you'd visited China and somewhere else. That was all at the time. And it was like this. Anyway, so that wasn't a phenomenal cruise. I actually have one video. I actually had made 2 other videos about it, which I haven't actually released yet. But I do have a video on the channel about it. And the fantastic thing about going on the river cruise is they're small, so it's quite an intimate experience. And you get to see just so much of Vietnam, and you go to really out of the way places. So you get to see a lot of the rural side of Vietnam. You go to see these very beautiful little temples, and it really is fascinating. So I would really strongly recommend that. You then, of course, go to Cambodia. Milo, now it's in January, which is the drier season. But actually, which is kind of the off season, what I would also do if you are looking at it is go more in the rainy season. Now, of course, it's rainy, which is not great, but it tends to come in like, bursts of rain. So it's not raining all the time. But you then have the Mekong is much fuller and it's really spread out. And so you then have, lots of the paddy fields and so on are magnificent. And also you can then sail right over the lake Tonle Sap, I think it was called. Whereas because in the low season, it's only about a meter or 2 deep, even the rainy season. So in the dry season, the ships can't go past you and bussing. So that's definitely something to think about. But I would strongly recommend go on the river cruise. It was great when I went on an ocean cruise. We got to see Ho Chi Minh City, but you don't really have time to go out. Go to the old, I can't remember the area is called now, where you have all the tunnels. And that's stuff. You don't really have a lot of time to just see a lot of when on a river cruise. You absolutely do see it. Paul's got a question about European river cruises, and I do get asked quite a lot about river cruises, and I do mean to cover them more so. But Paul, there's actually been some updates this week on European river cruise, so I'll talk about those now. So there was a conference where the river cruise companies came together that was reported in Travel Weekly, which is kind of one of the leading travel trade magazines. And what they said was they are optimistic about the chance of opening early on in the season. Now, the season normally starts really April sort of time. So they're optimistic about opening. However, they're saying it's likely to be on very limited ships and probably only for European guests. So the lines that have a strong European clientele, so your Crossy Europes, Nico Cruises, and all sorts of other smaller, very German or Austrian or Swiss lines, or Crossy Europe, which of course is a big line, but mostly sort of French, they are more optimistic they're going to be operating because, again, they're within the Schengen zone, or their guests are Schengen, so they can move around a little bit. You don't have a lot of the complications with the testing and all that sort of stuff. So they're optimistic. However, the lines that rely on English-speaking foreign guests from the US, Canada, Australia, UK, New Zealand, etc., they're saying they are less optimistic about opening early in the season, but they do think they will get to run a season this year because they're projecting that with the vaccines rolling out, there'll be more ability to open up. Importantly, because the average age on a river cruise tends to be older. I'm not sure the exact age, but on all the ones I've been on, the people have been 60s, 70s, and above. So it tends to be a little bit older. So a lot of those people in all these countries will, of course, been through vaccines and will be easier or more confident for traveling. So certainly what they're saying is they are more likely to open. And the important question you ask versus med cruises. It's really important, of course, because the river cruises do not have to follow and are not as constrained as the ocean cruises. So the ocean cruises have so many more restrictions, and there's big health, the big health authorities have to sign off on them, the equivalents of the CDC. Whereas the river cruises largely have to follow the rules that are in place for normal hotels and that kind of stuff. They have all brought in other rules around one-way systems, more mask wearing, which you have to do in a hotel anyway. So they are much less constrained and follow different sets of rules. They can actually get much easier sign-off to open, and they don't follow those whole like CDC equivalent rules. So when it comes to opening med cruises, I think they're going to find it much easier. Also importantly is they are able to switch it on much quicker. Although what they did say is they see having two big challenges when it comes to crew. One, most of their crew is pretty young, and because they couldn't work all season last year, many of them have gone to find new jobs where they possibly can. And secondly, they found the same with guides. A lot of the guides infrastructure, which was very reliant on coach trips and river cruises, a lot of them have also struggled. So they're worried a little bit about some of that kind of infrastructure, but it is still going to be kind of easier for them to switch it on, definitely, I would say. I might touch a little bit on, so I just want to check my battery's going beep, beep, beep. Battery's morning. Battery's back on. We nearly had a battery shutdown there. Sorry about that. A couple of questions about vaccines. I'm going to touch on vaccines. A couple of people have asked various things on vaccines, which I've seen coming up in the flow there. And I'll come back to Mystery Encounters about Norwegian Joy. So L. Faraday and a few other people, I think it was Jess, was making a comment around vaccines. I'm still hopeful the Princess will make vaccines mandatory. Any news on that? At this point in time, in terms of vaccines, there's only one cruise line which has said they're making it mandatory for guests, which is Saga Cruises out of the UK. And that was actually generally pretty well received. The other cruise groups have not stated a position yet. So first of all, though, we know that Norwegian Cruise Line Group, so that's includes Oceania, etc., they have confirmed that they are looking at it and they're discussing with their lawyers. And I guess they have to think through the whole implications, particularly families and all that sort of stuff, and kids who currently aren't qualified for vaccines, all that kind of stuff. The Royal Caribbean Group have also confirmed it's being discussed. They have pushed it into their Healthy Sailing Panel, which developed all of their guidelines. It's interesting because the Healthy Sailing Panel was combined between Norwegian and Royal Caribbean, funded that, so that'll be interesting. Carnival Group have sort of refused to comment. They've all said they want to make it compulsory for their crew. Of course, there's a challenge because vaccine rollout, particularly in those countries like the Philippines, India, and Indonesia, where they recruit the bulk into the number of recruiters, so they're younger and they're low down on the priority. So that may be a whole another thing. Certainly, so there's no real decision on that. Will they make it mandatory? I think it's going to. We just don't know. The thing I think is going to be interesting, what I've seen a lot of discussion amongst the travel industry and the various travel forums, is there's lots of discussion around whether that decision will actually be taken out of their hands, because you'll find that countries increasingly may require vaccines as part of the way of opening up international travel. Now, there is some pushback on that. I saw some stuff from the World Health Organization, some other travel bodies talking about, how testing may be more critical But there is a view that they may become, as countries open, just to protect their population generally. So it may end up coming almost through the back door, so that you almost have to have a vaccine to call on some of these ports. But certainly there's no news, and the lines are being relatively coy about it. I guess they're also focused at the moment very much more on getting the approval to sail with the existing protocols, because if they're hoping to sail, April, May, June, July, whatever time, which is before many countries would be able to impact vaccines. Salgo could do it because they're UK-based only. They have 2 ships. They have a 50+ only. You have to be over 50 before you can sail it. And, so their audience was high risk, and they are, already through the vaccine, heavily through the vaccine process already. So that was different. So certainly, one of the things that was interesting is on my channel, I get loads and loads and loads of people who are really, really anti-vaccines for cruising commenting. However, when I did a survey on that, I did it on Twitter, I did it on my channel, I've seen one done by Cruise Critic, between 70% and 80% of people in a survey will say they're very positive, but certainly the people who are against it are very, very vocal. So it's definitely going to be, a big discussion. I've seen something here on Azamara. So Steve's talking about Azamara. We would have gotten a corresponding member from our celebrity status if they may well do something similar now with Silverseas. So as most of you probably know, is Royal Caribbean is selling Azamara, and the deal's due to be done by the end of March. Azamara have announced they're buying Pacific Princess, which is going to become the 4th Azamara ship, R-class ship. They have the current person, I've forgotten the name, who runs Azamara, is going to be the president. They also have the ex-head of Holland America as their sort of president. So they have a lot of stuff there. We're all assuming that's going to happen is when they leave Royal Caribbean, you won't get that, that 2-way captain's circle, is it called? Is that what it's called? You won't get that recognition. I'm guessing, and I don't know, but I'm assuming they are likely to look at it for Silversea, because bear in mind, they took 100% ownership of Silversea in June last year. So they haven't really had a chance to, it's not really up and running. They're more worried about getting it selling. So I suspect they used to do it between Royal Caribbean and Celebrity, between Celebrity and Azamara, and so on. So it seems likely that as Silversea joins the group, but certainly no announcement from it. But it certainly would would make sense. Great. Some people saying they finally saying thanks for the live stream, which is really, really great. Some people already talking about having got the first shot, etc. Can't wait to sail again on our appointment. So let me go back, because sometimes what happens is as comments come in, it goes down. I sometimes make I miss some. Here we go. So Diane saying, love your channel. Do you have any new opinions on the Paul Gauguin cruises now that it was bought by Pennant? It's on my bucket list now. I'm wary. What other South Pacific cruises do you recommend? So certainly Paul Gauguin, which I did the year before, I'm so confused with these years, not sailing, must have been 2019, did Paul Gauguin, and it was fantastic. The destination was amazing, the service on the ship was amazing, but the ship itself is pretty dated. I mean, it's in good nick, but it is pretty dated. So I think the one thing that Pennant does bring to it, what they said is they're going to be bringing new ships in. So I think from that side, it's definitely very positive. My sense is that Paul Gauguin, because a lot of the people involved in Paul Gauguin, and it's so far away, I think Paul Gauguin will probably maintain a lot of what it's got, because the people are definitely still involved in it. I guess as it gets a little bit bigger, moves into more than one ship, it could change. But certainly, I think it's unlikely to change quickly. And certainly the experience we had was fantastic. Now, I haven't cruised on Pennant. I'm due to cruise on Pennant at the end of this year on their Antarctica thing. So I haven't been on it. People who've been on Pennant have enjoyed it, have liked it, have found it, the service, it's very French, I guess. So I would be less concerned, but I understand your reservations, because it is a very expensive journey. It's a long way to go, and it's very expensive. So in terms of what other people are doing, the one thing you might want to look at, Diane, is Windstar. Now, Windstar operate, again, pretty much a long season in that whole area, calling on very similar islands, very similar itineraries, and they, again, have the small ship experience. And you know, I like Windstar. It's a little bit more casual, but I guess Port Gaghan is quite casual. It's probably not quite as the service is not quite to the same level, but people are very friendly. Also, passengers are very friendly. I've always had great experience with Windstar. So I'd take a look at Windstar. But you then do have other cruise lines that will send people down there. It's going to be interesting to see what Princess do, because Pacific Princess was the one, I guess, they used around that area. One of the things you might want to think, although it's very, very different, and is not for everybody, is Aranui. Now, Aranui currently has one ship, but they are launching a second ship, which is going to be more a traditional cruise ship. But Aranui is a hybrid ship. It's half a cargo ship and half a cruise ship. And it is the main supply vessel that calls on all of the more remote islands. So I think the shortest cruise you can do on them is 10 nights. And it goes to some of the islands that certainly in Port Gaghan and Windstar won't go to. And you know, they call in the ports, and then they're offloading and loading cargo. But then the front half of the ship is a very traditional cruise ship. So you have cabins, all different grades of cabins. You have some entertainment. It tends to be very local style entertainment, which it was also on Port Gaghan. It's a really unique and different experience. And again, I haven't been on that. I was due to go on it this year. No, where are we now? I'm so confused. Last year, I was chance going, then I was chance it was going to be this year, but it's not going to happen now. But I do know someone who went on it and absolutely loved it. So that's definitely something very unusual and different. You're going to see some very different parts. So I'll take a look at Windstar. Also take a look at Aranui and see if that's something that certainly would appeal, because I think it is definitely very interesting. There was a question which in the scrolling, I've sort of missed around. Norwegian Joy selling out of New York. Here we go. Mystery Mini Hunter. Great name. I'm sorry, do you think the Joy will sell out in New York on May the 30th in 2021? I would say almost no chance. And the reason I would say it is, first of all, the ship is about to sail off to Asia. It's going to be taking the crew back, all the crew they're sending back. So as I mentioned earlier on, for those who were early on, I'll repeat that, but they're collecting all the crew that they had brought back to manned ships, about 1,000 of them, some of which are in Europe, and they're sending them back to India, Philippines, and Indonesia. And Norwegian Joy is one of the ships going to be doing that. They're collecting it up. They're going to only be getting to Asia sometime I think they're aiming to get them back to sort of March, end of April time. It would mean they would then have to turn around and head all the way back and get back. And of course, that takes 6 or 7 weeks or so. So the ship is they're sending the ship a really long way from New York on a repatriation. What we saw last time on a repatriation is the ship stayed in the Philippines. They stayed in Asia until they brought the crew back, because of course some of the numbers of these crews is vast. So I would say it's highly unlikely. For that reason, the ship probably not there. And secondly, it seems unlikely that the lines will be through the CDC by May. Otherwise, Norwegian wouldn't be sending their ships away. The earliest you're likely, in order to sail in May, the 60 days from the test cruises, so May, April, they'd have to run in test cruises in March, which is possible, but seems unlikely. So I think it's unlikely. I guess they've only cancelled till the 1st of May, haven't they, if I remember correctly, on Norwegian. So I think it's, unfortunately, Mystery Mini Hunter. I think that's pretty unlikely. And someone's also asked the same question around from New York to Bermuda. That's maybe the same question. Question on, we should have everyone grants in September. Let me come back to that. I know it's slightly repeating. So Grant's asking, we are scheduled for Avalon Grand France in September. What do you think the chances it will run? Because Avalon relies very heavily on international guests, travel will have to be open by then. By September, I think it is much more likely. Again, there may be a lot of restrictions around, mask wearing and that sort of stuff. But certainly in the river cruises that ran last season, people didn't find them that alien because they were very similar to what you had to do anyway, because they follow very much hotel protocols. So, there was, dining was phased, was spread out. The tables were much more spread out. You weren't sitting with people you didn't know. You had to wear masks inside spaces. You had to wear masks on excursions, which were part of the requirement of the countries anyway. So it does feel more likely that things are opening. The big challenge, I guess, is if it gets so late in the season, whether they start selling, because the season sort of ends in October. But of course, they're going to do as hard as they possibly can, I would say, to do it. And river cruising certainly will be sailing. It's more those international ones that I think is more of a challenge. Whoops, I was going to say here, KB in the UK. KB in the UK. Hi, KB. KB's often on these here and always has difficult questions, which is always good. Have you ever visited the Cook Islands or Tahiti? Thinking of Australia, New Zealand cruise in 2022. Now, I haven't been to the Cook Islands, but I have been to Tahiti and all those islands around there. So it's absolutely, I would put that whole Tahiti, French Polynesian islands, we went to Bora Bora, Moorea, Huani, from pronouncing this really badly, places like that. And it was definitely one of the best, the most amazing cruises ever. The place is just stunningly beautiful. The people are amazing. The sea is amazing. It's just phenomenal. The culture is amazing. So definitely, I would really strongly look at that. The Cook Islands, I would love to go to, but I don't know much, much about the Cook Islands, and I don't really know anybody that's really been there. Irish in the USA, which is good to hear from you again. Often comment on the channel and joins the live stream, so that's fantastic. Good morning, Gary. Have you noticed increases in pricing for 2022 cruises? It's very interesting because this is one thing that I keep looking at and also talk to a lot of travel agents about and kind of track. It's very mixed, to be honest. What we're seeing and what the cruise lines have said they're trying to do is they're trying to hold pricing. But so if you look at the fare, you'll see, generally speaking, the fares are often comparable to what they were. And I think what they're saying is they're sort of seeing pricing at the moment, even heading out to 2022, holding at about 2019 pricing, because obviously you can't measure 2020. So around about that sort of price. So kind of relatively flat. But what we are seeing though is huge amounts of deals. So you're finding many cruise lines will give you the price will be the price. You go, whatever, it's about what it was last year, or the cruise has been cancelled. But they're bundling much more stuff in. So Hon America's doing their promotion, which you're getting gratuities, drinks package, some special dining, and I think Wi-Fi. You've got Princess are doing a similar thing. You've got Celebrity. Now, Celebrity is the one where I have seen prices go up, but it's interesting because Celebrity shifted to this more all-inclusive approach. So they now include some drinks and they include Wi-Fi. They basically bundle it in, and they have shifted prices. So when I compared my Celebrity cruises that were cancelled to the ones for 2022, prices did shift upwards. But again, it was also on Apex and Edge. So I don't know whether that's got a slight premium in it. What talking to the travel agents, what they're seeing is some inflation in pricing, which is probably cruise lines, if you're a cynic, trying to basically get back their bonus future cruise credit. So I'll give you 20% future cruise credit, but I'm going to charge you 20% more. However, I think my view anyway, is once cruising opens, once we absolutely know what's going to happen, we will see pressure on prices downwards. And I think because we will really know what demand is. And I believe, although all of us are very passionate about cruising is not going to be high on a lot of people's lists. There's all the new to cruise people. There's all the people who've done it once or twice. I feel, and again, this is more subjective, but people who really know cruising, they understand how the protocols are going to work. They're prepared to put up with some of the challenges, the testing, the temperature checking, all that sort of stuff. I think it's going to be softer. What the cruise lines are saying, sorry, it's a long way of answering your question, but I think it's an important one as you look at pricing. But what the cruise lines are saying is they're seeing demand for 2022, 2023 as pretty good, but it's not high enough. Because we've had over a year soon of no cruising, probably going to have 18 months of no cruising. But demand is good. But at best, it's kind of pre-pandemic sort of levels. And bear in mind, 50% of people whose cruises were cancelled, the cruise line telling us, took future cruise credits. So there's a lot of people with a lot of money looking to book cruises. So I really think we will see a lot of deals. The cruise lines have made it clear, unlike the 2008 when prices went down, they want to try and hold prices, and I think we'll see more stuff getting bundled, more offers and more deals. Balcony upgrades, that kind of stuff. So sorry, it was a slightly long way of answering the question, but certainly it's very mixed as we look at 2022. Very, very mixed. But I haven't seen a lot of increase, except for that celebrity. A lot of people calling me as well with the celebrity one. I was quite surprised, and they're sort of maybe fudging it with that new bundling, sort of all-inclusive. More inclusive thing. Again, lots of questions. I'm going to touch on this one. I want to just loop back a little bit into the vaccine one. There was, Louis. Louis or Lewis? I hope I pronounced that correctly. So, can you comment on Sarah Greer's question above about whether you think they will let kids sail since kids can't get vaccines for a while? There was kind of a cruise radio, Doug Parker Cruise Radio wrote an article which was, I guess, designed to be relatively provocative, which was around, kids could be banned from cruising because if vaccine becomes a requirement, either by countries or the cruise lines decide to do it, effectively kids can't cruise because at the moment the vaccines aren't approved for use, I think, under the age of 16. I think certainly the Pfizer one, if I remember correctly, is under 16. I think it's the same for AstraZeneca, Moderna, all the ones that are coming. What was interesting was, so in the briefing that we've had here from the chief science officer, what the point he's made is it's not that kids can't be vaccinated, it's that they've never done the studies yet on kids being vaccinated. So it's possible over time that gets looked at. That's why I think it's really going to be very interesting, because it seems to me unlikely that cruise lines like Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, Carnival, cruise lines that really rely very heavily on families are going to bring in a rule themselves that excludes families from cruising. So that's absolutely going to be something in the mix. So whether there ends up being, adults have to be vaccinated, crew have to be vaccinated under a certain age, don't. I do think, though, linking to a discussion we had last week, I do really think that we will see testing as a fundamental part of cruising for some period of time, for a couple of reasons. One of which is because, of course, as we keep getting reminded, certainly here in the UK, I don't know if it's true in other countries, but I'm guessing it is we keep getting reminded of the vaccine's role, and what its aim at the moment is to stop you getting extremely ill and dying from COVID-19. What's not clear yet conclusively is whether it stops you catching and passing on the virus. Now, I think there's some data, particularly with studies coming in Israel, etc. So, and there's lots of work being done on that. But it does seem like testing will be a key part of it, particularly if you think like on Saga. I'm going to use the example of Saga. So Saga have made vaccines compulsory, but they've also said that testing will remain as part of the protocols, because first of all, their crew cannot be vaccinated, and they have all sorts of protocols, multiple testing, social distancing, etc. So I think the way they may get around that will be the whole area of testing. And I think testing is going to be really, really important. Certainly that's what the airlines, for example, I've seen a lot of the airlines pushing for, though Qantas has made the point they're going to make vaccines required for their international travel. The airlines are pushing more for a testing protocol rather than a vaccine protocol, so you don't create that whole issue. If most of the US is vaccinated in positive normalcy, Yes, this sort of comes back to the point, I guess Uncle Chuckles saying masks will be required in distancing testing also regardless of the vaccine, although you can't get on without the vaccine either. So absolutely, that's the point. It's really interesting. What Saga have said is we have all these protocols which are designed to stop the spread of the virus, obviously stop you catching it. They're staying, and we're adding vaccine on top of that. So it's not an either or, and I suspect that's the direction of traffic seems to be heading. Quite a few people I've seen have actually had their vaccines already, which is great. I'm supposedly going to be getting mine. I'm due to, under the scheduling in the UK, should be getting my first jab before the middle of February, so that's quite exciting. So I'm just going back. Just going back. Lots of people asking questions about cruising and gay people being around on cruises. There is no cruise line that bans, I don't think they'd be allowed to, there's no cruise line that bans gay, lesbian, transgender, whatever people from cruising. Certainly that I'm aware of. I've never come across that. One of the, I guess, the challenges that they have is if cruises are calling in countries like Dubai, but then they're calling Dubai, then where it's illegal, they are briefing passengers. So, for example, when we went to Dubai, we were doing part of a leg of a world cruise, the whole ship was briefed on the protocol for the correct behavior in Dubai around shows of affection, whether you were same-sex or heterosexual or whatever actual you were. But what was very interesting, because having been to Dubai and seeing the crazy decadent kind of lifestyle that certainly expats and the tourists did, it was very interesting. They were briefing us. But I guess if cruises go in Saudi Arabia or places like that, I guess there would be more restrictions around that. But certainly there's no cruise line that I have ever come across that doesn't allow gay, lesbian, etc., transgender, whatever people on. And in fact, many of the cruise lines actually are very active in that whole community. So there is a site which is called Meet Me on Board, which specifically caters for gay and lesbian charter cruises, and they cover all the cruises. They are sponsored by lines like Azamara, Cunard, I can't remember who else. They have a whole lot of corporate sponsors who sponsor the site, and many of them then arrange various meetups on board. So then that's the case. Let's have a look. Lots of questions about Alaska. I might touch again on Alaska because I've seen quite a few people ask that, and certainly the way people come and go from the live stream, some miss the bit. So I thought I'd just touch base on Alaska. So DJ Afro Ash, do you think Alaska could have an end of season for cruising in August and September? I mean, definitely Alaska, just touching on what I said earlier, Alaska is very keen, of course, to have cruise industry. I've read some stuff from the Alaska, I guess what would be the finance, the Chambers of Commerce, that's what I'm looking for, talking about, just how devastating it's been not having the cruise industry in these places. I mean, Skagway, for example, if you've ever been to Skagway, I can't remember the population, but the full-time year-round population is tiny. And then, of course, all the workers come in to service the cruise industry. Of course, all the tourists come in. So it's been pretty devastating economically. So they're very keen to have a season back again. But there are so many issues. Will they be towards the end of the season, August, September? The season normally ends around October. As I mentioned earlier, some of them are pushing it further this year to try and go even later in the season, which I don't know what it'd be like at that time of the year. But so there's definitely a lot of energy. There's a lot of hurdles. You've got that, as I said, the CDC hurdle to get through. You've got Canada opening their borders hurdle. You've got requirements on what it takes, testing, vaccines, whatever, to get in another country. It depends on what you're going to be even allowed to do in port, which still could be managed, and whatever the protocols on land. So a lot of it are questions. I mean, at this point in time, very few lines have cancelled Alaska. So we've seen a couple of ones. So Cunard cancelled their Alaska season, which wasn't a particularly long one. Seabourn had to change all of their cruises to 7-night cruises because of the CDC rule around cruises only being allowed to be 7 nights until November. We saw Royal Caribbean pull Quantum of the Seas out, and they're keeping that in Singapore. Someone reported that Viking have put all of their Alaska as sold out at this point in time, which could either be a signal that they realize they're getting capacity, because bear in mind, under the CDC rules, you have to sell with lower capacity, or it could mean they're planning something different, or they're not feeling good about the timing. It does feel to me like there's going to be such pressure to try and find some sort of season to operate by then. So certainly if you were booking an Alaska cruise at the end of the season, I had an early Alaska season cruise, which of course got cancelled early on, because that was the other thing that happened. May's already been wiped off. So that certainly is certainly a possible. Someone just commenting, Diane, commenting that her April 2020 Equinox cruise was 11-day ABC. I guess it's the islands. Now September 22, for the same price, I had to go for a 9-day ABC Friendship. So yes, prices shifted up in Celebrity. So they definitely used that change in going more all inclusive. And certainly that was the comment I've had talking to travel agents with Celebrity was definitely the one there. So let me just scroll back. I'm doing it again on my computer, which again, apologize for the eyes with the way the lights are. Because my iPad decided not to cooperate. I'm getting all these bizarre things running. So let's have a look. Do you have any opinions of Paul Gann? We've answered that, which is great. Lots of discussion again on vaccines. People won't take it. Sussex Girl asked a question about Queen Mary at the beginning of September. I covered that a little bit earlier, so you can also afterwards. By the way, this video, the live stream goes live as a video, so you can also go back and re-listen to it. So I touched on it, but I will touch on it again. I think I would put it as a 60, 40, 70, 30 something, because you've got they'll have to go through the CDC process. It depends on, of course, travel all opening, but I'm relatively optimistic. I'm certainly hoping so, because I'm due to go in August, so that becomes really important. So very nice comments there, which is great. Let's have a look. I want to talk about transatlantic, because I've just sort of said, are transatlantic cruises worth doing? Looking to this for 2022. Do also have trans-Pacific cruises. So just transatlantic cruises. I love transatlantic cruises. I really, really love them. I've done, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4 Cunard, no, 5 actually, 5 Cunard transatlantic. I'll talk about that in a second, and then one repositioning, 2 repositioning cruises. Transatlantics are fantastic if you like sea days. So there's 2 ways really to do it. Two things to think about if you're interested in transatlantics. One of them is if you want to do the kind of iconic, harking back to the good old beautiful days of glamorous transatlantics, ocean liners, then, and you like dressing up and you love that whole thing, then the Queen Mary 2 transatlantic is an absolute must. It's one of the things I think everyone should do. But you are at sea for 7 nights, and you're at sea the whole time. Leave Southampton, get to New York, and vice versa. But because Cunard have been running these things for for decades and decades and decades and decades, probably hundreds, well, they're 175, 180 years now. But so they know how to do this. So it's a really slick operation. There's lots to do, so much to do. You actually run out of time. You get kind of frustrated because not a lot to, you can't do everything they've got to do. Incredible speeches, the dressing up, but you do need to like dressing up, because to really get into the transatlantic thing on Queen Mary 2, you need to really dress up. You can not dress up and go to the Lido, King's Court, I remember it's called, but it's not. The whole experience is around dressing up. If you're a gentleman, most people wear tuxedos. You can wear a dark suit and tie if you want. Ladies, beautiful gowns. It's really fantastic. So that's the one way of doing it, and you do that really inexpensive, because inside cabins, ocean view cabins are not that expensive in relative terms. Of course, you can go and spend $30,000, $40,000 going in the big grand suites. That's the one way of doing it. The second thing is look at repositioning cruises. Now, repositioning cruises are generally a much cheaper way of doing it. And these are when they move the ships normally in a normal year, between the Mediterranean down to the Caribbean mostly. That normally happens around about October time. And when they send them back from the Caribbean to the Mediterranean, which is normally around about April time. Now, most people, certainly on many of those lines, whether it's Princess, Holland America, Seabourn, whatever it is, a lot of people who go on those cruises are not really into the sea days. They are much more interested in the destination or, where they're going to. So they tend to have great deals and great discounts on those repositioned cruises. What they tend to do is they might do one or two ports on one end. So you might go to, might leave from Southampton or Barcelona or something. You might do one or two ports. You might stop some way on the way over, and then you'll do 1 or 2 nights in the Caribbean and go off to Port Canaveral or Miami or wherever. But you can see fantastic deals on that. Now, there's a lot to do on those lines because they lay on much more, but it's not quite the same experience. But if you like sea days, it's a fantastic way to do it. And particularly if you don't like flying, it's really fantastic that you have to fly the other way back, I guess. But yes, I really love transatlantics, and I've had, that's the one thing that's been cancelled. I was supposed to have done one in May, that got cancelled, obviously. With the way things are going, I've moved that to August, and we will see. But really strongly recommend them. Someone's asked me an impossible question, Tracy. What's the power output of a ship? I have Christopher Tracy's asked. I have no idea. I probably should do because I'm such a geek. I don't know. I'm afraid that's a good question. You have to Google that one. I'm afraid. I have no idea, but it's a lot. And actually, some of the things that are worth doing, if you're, depending on, I'm not sure where you're based, but there's certainly in the UK, and I'm guessing it'll be the same in the US, is on a couple of the channels, whether it's National Geographic Channel or some of those channels, they have a series called Mighty Ships, which cover some of the big cruise ships. And because it's slightly designed for geeky people, it talks about some of the, the lovely stuff of cruising, but it does get down to the nitty-gritty around the engines and the engineering and stuff. So definitely that's a good way of checking that out. But that's definitely one question I can't answer. So it's quite good to get good question. I want to just touch on this one. This is a great one, Scott. Glad you raised this. Just on the Disney are partnering with Ponant for expedition cruises. What do you think about that? Very interesting, because they're actually doing 2 partnerships. And it's very interesting because it's been not done by the Disney Cruise Line. It's done by Adventures by Disney, which is a different grouping. So Disney Cruises themselves, they're not doing the partnership. It's Adventures by Disney or Adventures with Disney. And they've done 2 deals. One of which, or 2 charters, should I say, one of which is Ponant, which, as Scott said, is to do some expedition cruising. And then they've also done a partnership, and my mind's gone blank, I apologize, to do the Galapagos. And I can't remember who they're doing the Galapagos one with. But anyway, I'll have a look at that and I'll post that. I think it's going to be very interesting because, Disney, as you know, has a very specific way of doing things. Ponant has very experienced expedition teams, and of course they have the ships with all the right gear. I think it's going to be a really interesting match because the Ponant ships are very modern, they're very contemporary, they're very slick, so it fits. They're very premium, so it fits with that kind of experience. I think it's going to be a very interesting because Disney are so controlling and very specific about their brand. I think you'll find that they will take really strong control. I know other people who've been on Ponant, quite a lot of different charters actually. And I know other people have been on other charters with Ponant, and they have always raved about the sense of charter Ponant. So Ponant certainly has good experience in that whole chartering area. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I did see it actually. It was very appealing. I just want to touch a little bit on Ponant. Some news that broke today. Now Ponant were expecting to start cruising in the New Zealand next month, February. In a few days now, for New Zealand guests only, and that's another charter. It's a partnership with a travel firm in New Zealand. New Zealand is now refusing the ship in because what happened was they did the charter with some travel agencies, done the charter selling the cruises. They spoke to the health part of the New Zealand government, I guess, and they kind of agreed the protocols. but they didn't speak to the immigration properly, and the immigration department is refusing to give the Penant crew visas, and they've only allowed, I think it's 19 or 29 of the crew visas, which of course they can't run the cruises with it. So that's another one to watch. So the charters don't always go smoothly, I guess, but I think it's going to be a really, really interesting one. So it's now, our hour's already up, and so many questions. I hope I haven't missed too many cruises. What I will do though is I do take a look at those cruises, and I'll make sure that I will touch on those in the next live stream, or I'll touch on those in some of the updates. So these are really helpful to everybody. So thanks so much for joining. Thanks for giving up an hour or even part of an hour of your Saturday. I really, really appreciate it. Keep supporting the channel, keep watching. The best thing you can do, of course, is to keep watching, leave comments, join the live stream. And again, we'll do another live stream next week. So thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it enormously. So have a great rest of your weekend.